It's always weird to me when a whole bunch of people come out of the woodwork and start attacking something with very similar talking points. I feel like this happens a lot and it never seems organic. Usually, when that happens, it's hard to pinpoint the forces that might be behind it. But with this week's item non grata, which is apparently homeschooling your kids, I think I have some idea. Now, obviously, this is a debate that has raged for my entire lifetime, and it seems like the latest iteration of it got kicked off by this guy's tweet. An account by the name Knowing Better, which seems to like re-up this debate every couple of years. Once I looked at his account, he wrote, "I get flack every time I say this, so I figured I should clarify. Universally, 100% of the time, homeschooling is the worst option for every single child without exception. I'm not being hyperbolic." I just automatically think you're probably not that bright if you're coming online and alleging that something is automatically bad for 100% of people. You probably have a very collectivist mindset, but unfortunately, not everyone seems to see through this kind of personality, and a lot of people were agreeing with him. And some of them agreed with him to like very extreme degrees. This account said, "I believe that if you homeschool your kids, you should be publicly shamed and put in prison." And it wasn't just like anon trolls, rage baiters posting this kind of stuff. Ari Drennan, who I'm mutuals with on Twitter, I like her, but she weighed in on this and said, "Except in very specific short-term situations, homeschooling your child should be against the law," which if something is against the law, the end result is you go to jail or prison if you attempt to do it. So like this is a very extreme thing to say. Some accounts that were weighing in were less extreme. They seemed to be kind of like dipping their toe in the water. They were still insinuating many of the beliefs about the problems around homeschooling that the more rage baity type accounts were posting, but they were trying to do it in a way where they wouldn't incur as much wrath like this woman.
This is a sincere query. I am curious about previously homeschooled children who are now adults and their perspectives on their parents' decision to homeschool them. Are you successful? Did you have challenges? Do you want to homeschool your own children? What about it did you like or not like once you graduated or you like stopped doing homeschooling? I'm genuinely curious. I don't know anyone in my life sincerely who was homeschooled, and I'm just curious because there's just like a lot of homeschooling going on, and I'm just wanting to know more about life as an adult for homeschooled children.
Well, as a previously homeschooled adult, I think I can answer this, and I actually have very strong opinions on the matter. So let's get into it. First, I'm Hannah Cox with Base Politics. Welcome to my channel where I bring you my politically homeless takes on politics and culture. Before we get started, make sure you like this video. Please subscribe if you have not, and make sure you hit the notification bell so you never miss one of my episodes. So I think it's vitally important to understand what is driving this conversation. It did not come out of nowhere, and the timing is very suspect to me. For those of you who follow me on other platforms, you know I do a lot of work at the state level and the federal level, but particularly at the state level where the legislatures are kicking back off their sessions as of this week. And one of the top issues that we know states are going to be debating is the topic of school choice. This is something that has gained a ton of momentum since COVID. I've been working on it since 2016. I'm very passionate about this issue, even though I don't have my own children, because I think that without an educated population, our country is dunzo, and we don't have it right now, okay? Americans are literally getting dumber by the second. What is happening with our education system is atrocious. And the proof is in the pudding. I mean, you don't have to even look at the abysmal test scores or pay attention to the fact that our IQ rates are literally falling. Just look around you. Look at the comment section. Pay attention to how people can't read. They don't have basic reading comprehension. They don't even have basic listening comprehension. Like, we are up a creek. But what you need to know is that school choice used to be really hard to pass, okay? Because all of the money was stacked against us. Even though we had the arguments on our side, we were up against people who had a lot more money to spend lobbying. And so we lost. Once COVID happened and parents started paying attention what was actually happening in their kids' classrooms and started supporting it, the like dominoes have fallen so quickly. There has been a huge tidal wave of school choice bills that have passed across this country, and that trend is only going to continue. I'm working in Tennessee right now where the governor has called a special session for January 27th. I think that will likely be the first state to move it this year, but I expect many others to follow suit. And as a whole, what this all boils down to is that the public school system is crashing out. They no longer have public support on their side. They certainly don't have the arguments on their side that they should be the ones that get to educate your kids because they're spending $15,000 per year on average, a lot more in many places. And the results are getting worse and worse and worse. And we know that those dollars are not getting funneled into the classrooms. They're not even getting funneled into the teachers' pockets. They're getting funneled into bloat and bureaucracy. And this is why I think Trump is absolutely right to try to get rid of the Department of Education. But what this means is that the teachers unions, the people who make their living off the public school system, which is a lot of people, particularly even in red counties, rural counties, oftentimes the prisons and the schools are the top employers. And so they don't really care what happens with kids. They are fighting for the right to exist as a leech off of your tax dollars. As my friend Angela Morabito pointed out, the New York City Department of Education has 1,032 employees making over $200,000 per year. 30% of their eighth graders cannot read. Is it any wonder 150,000 students have left New York City public schools since the pandemic? Like, people are already leaving the schools even without school choice, which does still hurt them because they get funded per pupil. But obviously, school choice is going to provide a lifeline for a lot of people who are too poor to do that on their own. Most people can't afford to not only have to pay for the public school system to exist and then pay double on top of it to get their kid out. School choice would provide them with that ability. So this is why they are running scared. On Twitter, Aaron Smith pointed out public school enrollment is falling fast, a trend that will persist with projected enrollment losses of 2.7 million students by 2032. With falling birth rates and parents looking to K-12 alternatives such as private schools and homeschooling, state and local policymakers will need to right-size public education. So funding cuts are happening with or without school choice. And that's why you see so many people who benefit from this system scrambling and trying to malign alternative options that parents are increasingly looking to. And you can show these people how badly the school system is failing, how much money has been dumped into it. And it's like they have a total like blinder on. They will just refuse to look at the information, at the proof, because they don't ultimately care about what happens to the kids in this system. Okay. They are fighting for their existence. If they're politicians or if they're people in the teachers unions, they're fighting for their money. There is a lot of money on the table when it comes down to it. And then lastly, you have a lot of ideologues who have taken control of the school system, who are fighting for the ability to control what your kids think, what they learn, what information is put before them. This is about indoctrination and it is about control. Which is so ironic because one of the top arguments these types of people will always try to use against homeschooling is that like super religious people or super conservative people are just trying to indoctrinate their kids. And particularly, they'll try to say that they are wanting to indoctrinate them with misinformation, with disinformation, according to their views, which is just absolutely the audacity. I can't fathom having this audacity. People have a right to their kids. They have a right to decide what they want their kids to learn. Obviously, if they are Christian, they are going to want their kids to be brought up with a Christian education. The same would be true if you were an atheist. You would want your kid brought up without a religious education, and the list goes on and on. That is your prerogative to determine. There's nothing wrong or coercive or corrupt about that. What's actually corrupt is thinking that you should have the right to determine what people's kids learn. You should have the right to indoctrinate them towards your way of thinking, and especially to believe that only you have some kind of a monopoly on truth and have some kind of ability to determine like these are absolutely the things that kids must know and believe, and these things are wrong and disinformation. That just doesn't work in a country of 380 million people past the basic building blocks. Like, yes, we can all agree that kids need to have the fundamentals of being able to read taught to them, but I would be able to argue with like two hands tied behind my back that they aren't getting that in the public school system. I've done a lot of work exposing how the public school system started using the curriculum of a woman named Lucy Calkins a number of years ago, which is basically like vibes-based reading, and stop teaching phonics so that kids can no longer read.
Okay, I'm about to nerd out for a minute. Please join me. So growing up, I was mostly homeschooled, not like the Duggars, not taught math kind of homeschool, no, like the real kind of homeschool where we end up like 15 to 30% higher on standardized tests than public school kids. And one of the reasons for that is that my mom obtained her teaching degree in Alabama and was horrified by the curriculum and just like really low standards in public schools. And there was one particular point of contention that got brought up over and over when it came to the curriculum public schools used and why homeschooling was so superior. Like, I could have told you about this when I was 4 or 5, and I'm confident no other 4 or 5-year-old had even ever heard these words. And it came down to how reading is taught in US schools. Now, historically, and in most homeschool curriculums, they use an actual science to teach reading called phonics. Phonics is based on the way words sound. You're taught the different sounds of consonants and verbs and how different combinations sound, and you're taught like actual building blocks to read. And you employ things like sound and context in order to know how different words within English that can be used in multiple ways might be different in different sections of reading. You get the point. But in public schools, they had started using something that got away from phonics beginning in the 1980s. Instead of actually teaching kids to read, they were using sort of guesswork to have kids look at pictures or, flip back through the pages and kind of make a guess at what the words might say. And it turns out that most of this stemmed from a curriculum that was written by a woman named Lucy Calkins. And she had this idea that kids wouldn't learn how to love reading and therefore writing if they had to, be given a steady progression of books that got harder and kept challenging them, or if they had to bother with silly things like learning the basic building blocks of literacy. And for whatever godforsaken reason, the public schools ran with this and started employing her curriculum. And she has been like a figurehead for some time. She's made a ton of money off of this. She has multiple companies. She's gone global. But her empire is starting to fall. And that's because the chickens are coming home to roost. Americans are getting dumber. Literally, IQ scores are falling. And when it comes to test scores for reading and math, in the gutter. So a lot of schools are starting to toss out her curriculum. I love that they call this vibes-based literacy because that just perfectly encapsulates everything about this. It turns out when you use emotions versus facts to teach, it doesn't go so well. And again, you can look at the scores of homeschool kids that were not being forced to learn in this way and see that they have not fallen. They're doing just great. So something's wrong with the public schools and specifically their curriculum, amongst many other things. Kids that suffer from dyslexia, kids who have English as a second language, have less language-rich homes, they have especially suffered under this. And those are years of academic achievement that you can't just make up. And this is one reason school choice is needed like yesterday. Monopolies, which is what the government has over public education, they stifle competition and they allow bad ideas to thrive for a lot longer than they would in the free market when people can vote with their feet and remove their kids from bad environments. And I seriously doubt Calkins is the only grifter ruining public schools in this manner.
But like, here's an example. This woman was on Twitter. She said, I'm about to pull my daughter out of public school and make the switch to homeschooling. And somebody tried to argue with her and say that essentially she couldn't teach science. And she said, I'm sorry, I'm a creationist. I don't believe in evolution, but thanks for giving input. I still respect your opinion. Somebody quote tweeted this whole exchange and said, there are people on this site who actually pretend to not understand why some of us might think homeschooling is bad. I don't think you've made a point here. I don't believe in creationism. I think it's silly. I obviously grew up around a lot of people who do believe in creationism. But if that's what you think, you can teach your kids that. Like, the whole debate over where the earth came from, over what the actual science is not settled. It's still very much ongoing. People have differing opinions on this. And you know what? Even if she is dead wrong, there are a lot of teachers in the public school system who believe dead wrong things that are still allowed to teach their crap and push it, particularly progressive economics and ideas around how a country should function, around civics. So you're not worried about indoctrination. You just think you're the one who should get to determine what that curriculum is that is being indoctrinated. The other argument I saw a lot of these people pushing is this whole notion of like, you're not certified, you're not qualified to teach your kids, which just does make me LOL because number one, many people who homeschool are. My mom had a teaching degree. It's what actually made her want to homeschool us because she went and got her degree in Alabama and she was realizing that a lot of the teachers who were getting a degree right alongside her were also functionally illiterate and that we weren't going to get a good education if she put us in that public school system. So I know firsthand that many of the people who are teaching their kids are highly educated, highly qualified. But secondarily, there are so many things to assist you in homeschooling, okay? It's not that you're just like out there flying blind, particularly now that we have computers and so much assistance that you can get online. Also, many homeschoolers don't just like sit at home. This is how uneducated these people are. They don't even know homeschoolers. They have no idea what our world looks like. But when I was homeschooled, I did that kind of traditional thing where it was just me and my mom for the first couple of years. But once I was in later elementary school, we had huge homeschool groups. We had tons of activities. We had tons of parents who were coming together. We had tutors. We had people with different kinds of expertise. Like you weren't just dependent on one person educating you. And then as I moved into middle school, I went to what's called a cottage school where you go and get training and sit in a class and have a schedule from various different teachers. It's like a whole private school, but you only go 2 days a week and then you're given assignments and you homeschool the other 3 days, but they take a lot of the grading and instruction off your parents' back. So there's a lot of assistance that can help people. And on top of all of that, to act as if public school teachers are just pillars of information and academic success is such a joke. As Hunter Ash pointed out, education is actually one of the lowest IQ majors. So he said any reasonably bright parent can give their kid a better education than most public schools. Like, I'm sorry, I don't mean this as an insult to anybody who is a teacher. I think a lot of people go into this field with the best of intentions, but honestly, a lot of them get pushed out because working in the public school system, I could make a whole other video about how the public school system is failing teachers and how terrible of a job it's become for many of them, but it tends to push out the best and brightest, just like we see happening with cops. Even the people who go in with good intentions, like they don't tend to stick with it for very valid reasons. And not only are many of the teachers in the system not necessarily the best and brightest, we're also seeing a lot of studies showing that AI is running circles around them. I loved this person on Twitter said, homeschooling doesn't work and teachers know better, advocates in shambles. 6 weeks of personalized AI tutoring gave students the same gains of 2 years of learning in this new study. A little more information on that. They say new randomized controlled trial of students using GPT-4 as a tutor in Nigeria. 6 weeks of after-school AI tutoring equaled 2 years of typical learning gains, outperforming 80% of other educational interventions. And it helped all students, especially girls, who were initially left behind. So while I get this kind of lobbying as a form of protectionism, at the end of the day, it doesn't really seem like they have much of a leg to stand on. Like a lot of these jobs are going to go away regardless. When you look at the data around homeschooling, the outcomes are simply better. It is inarguable, including when it comes to socialization. Overall, 78% of the 45 peer-reviewed studies on this found that homeschooled students or graduates perform significantly better than their conventional or institutional school peers in terms of academic achievement, social and emotional development, and success into adulthood, including at college and university. This whole notion that homeschoolers are somehow like socially weird or inept is just nothing could be further from the truth. And I want to say first and foremost, there are plenty of weird and socially inept kids in all schools. Like if you went to public school, I'm pretty sure you knew some socially inept kids, right? Like this is a whole stereotype of a type of person you go to school with. It really is something that you'll find in any model. But this notion that you find more of it in homeschooling, nothing could be further from the truth. Absolutely nothing. In fact, it is the exact opposite. Homeschoolers I know are more capable of getting along with people from various age ranges. They're more comfortable going up and discussing things with adults and holding conversations. They tend to be more able to hold eye contact. They're less shy. And that's because they didn't go to school and get indoctrinated into like sitting in these weird segments where they can only interact with their peers. They didn't get bullied by a bunch of kids trying to stomp out their individuality and creativity, which I already see with my 9-year-old stepdaughter happening. Like it is so sad to me to hear about her school experience. Like she won't wear anything but neutral colors at this point. She never wants to do anything that's going to stand out. Like she is so consumed with trying to fit into the mold so as not to get bullied or made fun of that it's like completely washing her out. And I think that it's awful. To me, it's just like the most bleak thing in the world to watch happen. That doesn't happen in homeschooling. Instead, you get to grow up with the safety of your parents and your siblings and to interact with other kids from good families. I mean, that's really what it comes down to, right? Like parents and family structure have a lot to do with how a kid turns out socially. So if the parents are super weird, and they don't involve them in all of the opportunities that are on the table for homeschoolers, then like, yeah, I see how you can get some people who are weird and homeschooled, and that like, I guess furthers the stereotype around it. But the vast majority of them are not that. They're actually from very stable, good families. They're being taught good manners. They're being taught good social skills. They're being provided with tons of interactions with kids their age and outside of their age as well.
Why homeschoolers are weird, part 1. As a product of the public education system, let me tell you, it was culture shock when I started homeschooling my kids and hanging out with all the homeschoolers and going to the homeschool co-ops. The first thing I noticed was how the kids of different ages treated each other. To me, it seemed pretty bizarre that the 16-year-old wasn't irritated by the 5-year-old's incessant questions. The 8 and the 10-year-old would play happily with the 4-year-olds. The 12-year-old boys would ooh and ah at the babies. Similarly, none of the kids seemed intimidated by the adults. They would walk right up to the adults and carry on a conversation. They seemed to innately understand childhood development in a way that we have to teach at a college level. I felt like I was the one that was unsocialized. The reason that homeschoolers seem unsocialized to those in public school is because it's a completely different culture. We would not tell somebody coming from a different country that they're unsocialized. We would just understand that they have a different culture than we do.
I loved this meme somebody posted. They said, my kid's not getting, quote, socialized by public school ferals. It's a feature, not a bug of homeschooling. And the meme says, first they say my kids are smart. Next they say they are well-spoken and friendly. Then I tell them we homeschool. And then they say, but what about socialization? And this played out all the time for me as a kid because I'm the oldest of 4. My mom was carting us all over Louisville, where I mostly grew up, and we were like the best behaved kids, and we got along so well. We were already like so tight knit, and adults would always come up and compliment her and compliment us. And then when they would find out we were homeschooled, you could just see their programming kind of like shake their minds. Like, what do you mean? What do you mean they're like great kids and not weird in their homeschooling? They couldn't even calculate it. And I just think the notion that you're going to bully people who are homeschooling into putting their kids in school to socialize them it's very funny. Like you don't even have a conception of the people you're trying to criticize or persuade because they don't want their kids to end up like the norm. If you haven't looked around, the average normal person not doing so great. Okay. Like the whole point is they want something different and better for their kids. As this woman said, it's so funny to me when people try to shame homeschooling parents and call us our kids weird. We were brave enough to buck the system and make lifestyle choices that are completely against the grain. Do you think calling us weird on the internet is going to change our minds? School is what is actually unnatural. Making a kid wake up super early, leave their family, go sit in a desk, get held back by kids who aren't as smart as they are or who aren't as hardworking as they are, not getting to play outside. It's meant to indoctrinate people to prepare them for a 9-to-5. I'm convinced of it. And I'm convinced that was why I was so ill-equipped to be okay with that kind of structure once I graduated college. It's why I've been, I think, strong enough to go build the career I have because I just couldn't live like that. I was like, what do you mean I have to just sit here from 9 to 5, even if I have my work done? What do you mean I have to ask to like take a vacation? What do you mean? Like, I just think homeschoolers are so much more likely to be system wreckers, to be wrecking balls, to be people who push back, to be entrepreneurs, to be people who envision new ways of doing things because they haven't been indoctrinated in that way.
How the hell are you going to prepare them for the real world if you're always homeschooling your kids and mollycoddling them and they can decide what they're going to do? What they're going to do when they have a real job?
I think it's the complete opposite.
Why?
How is school the real world? How can you compare a classroom to the real world?
Obedience.
Why should we be obedient? Who wants you to be obedient?
How interesting.
Yeah.
But entrepreneurs aren't born from obedience, are they?
No, exactly.
But we are taught to kind of be obedient because, right, you have to listen to your...
Who does that suit? Kind of school came at the same time as the Industrial Revolution and they wanted to create workers that would fit into the system. And I don't necessarily share this view, but there are comparisons of the school system to prisons. And if you look at the buildings and the way that you have to ask for permission for things, you have certain times, you have breaks for things, everything is set into a certain time frame, and you have an authority to figure everything within that. They kind of compare them.
And of course, I'm not saying that everyone should homeschool. Not everybody is equipped to do it. Not everybody has the time to do it. I accept that. In the early years, I certainly think that it is a great gift to provide your kids. Now, I didn't homeschool all the way through. Once I got to high school, I started going to private school. And then at the very end, I went to public school. So I kind of got like to taste and experience a little bit of everything. And not every school structure is good for a kid throughout their entire lives. Kids change, their needs change, there are different periods of, what they want to do and what they want to experience. So sometimes being in a school system makes sense, sometimes homeschooling makes sense. But I will say this, I would do anything I could do if I did have kids to not have them in public schools. And even other teachers are honest about that at this point. This woman, Samantha Joy, said, "Me in university, only crazy people opt for homeschooling. Me as a public school teacher, I would be insane to send my kids here." This guy said, "I've been a college professor for over 30 years. Every homeschooled student I've had has been far advanced academically and socially compared to their public school peers, without exception." The people who benefit from public schools have been trying to spread these same tired narratives for years, but their claims are only looking crazier and crazier as the government system rots beneath their feet and homeschoolers continue to sail past them. And it's just exposing how self-serving they are and what their true intentions have always been, which is that they want to control and indoctrinate your kids. And that should concern you. Fortunately, like I said, we're moving into state session, so pay attention if your state has a school choice bill. That's an excellent thing to get involved in. If you have kids or not, we need to give people the power to determine what is best for their kids, and we need to ensure that we have an educated population so that our country can continue to exist. All right, guys, I hope you like this episode. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you've not already, and if you want even more content, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok until Sunday.